What happens when a man known for playing geniuses, sorcerers, and tortured souls walks onto a stage designed for comfort and finds himself instead inside a storm? What happens when charm meets confrontation? When measured British restraint collides with an American morning show that thrives on sharp questions and sharper opinions? Before we go any further, if you love cinematic celebrity moments like this, hit subscribe to Stage View right now, tap like, and drop a comment as you watch. This channel lives for the moments they never planned to air the way they happened. The applause begins before Benedict Cumberbatch even fully appears from behind the curtain. It's the polite kind at first, then louder, swelling as the audience recognizes him. Tall, angular, impeccably dressed, that familiar mix of intellect and mystery written into the way he carries himself. He smiles, that careful smile fans know well, the one that says thank you without promising too much. He waves, nods, steps forward, and for just a second, everything feels exactly as it should. Sunny Hostin watches him from across the table, hands folded neatly, expression unreadable. She's been on this stage long enough to know when a moment is about to turn. Around her, the other hosts exchange glances, anticipation humming just under the surface. This isn't supposed to be explosive. It's supposed to be promotion, a new project, a few laughs, maybe a thoughtful comment or two. Benedict takes his seat. The chair creaks softly as he settles in, crossing one leg over the other. He adjusts his jacket, glances at the audience again, and exhales. The cameras zoom in, capturing the smallest details. The slight tension in his jaw, the way his fingers interlace and then separate, as if already preparing for something unseen. Sunny leans forward just a fraction. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough to signal intent. "So, Benedict," she begins, her voice calm, warm even, "you've built a career playing complex, often morally conflicted characters. People look to you as someone thoughtful, socially aware. But recently, some of your comments have stirred debate. The word hangs there. Debate. Not accusation. Not praise. Something in between." Benedict nods slowly, the practiced nod of someone who's heard this framing before. He smiles again, but this time it doesn't quite reach his eyes. "Yes," he says lightly. "I suppose that comes with the territory." A ripple of laughter moves through the audience. The tension eases, just a bit. Sunny doesn't laugh. She tilts her head, eyes steady on him. "Does it?" she asks. "Or does it come with saying things publicly without fully acknowledging the impact they have on people who don't share your position or your privilege?" There it is. The air in the studio shifts. You can feel it even through the screen, the way conversations do when they suddenly stop being polite and start being real. Benedict's posture changes. He straightens, uncrosses his legs, places both feet firmly on the ground. "I'm very aware of my position," he replies, choosing each word with care. "And I try to speak from a place of empathy, not authority." Sunny's lips press into a thin line. But empathy without lived experience can still be harmful, can it? A murmur moves through the audience now. Not laughter, not applause. Something closer to a collective intake of breath. Benedict blinks once. For the first time, the mask slips just slightly. "I don't think the solution is silence," he says. "If people in visible positions never speak, never engage, then nothing moves forward." Sunny nods slowly, as if agreeing, then pivots. "Engaging is one thing," she says. "But centering yourself in conversations about issues that don't directly affect you, especially when those voices already struggle to be heard, that's another." The camera cuts briefly to Whoopi Goldberg, who raises an eyebrow but stays quiet. Joy Behar shifts in her seat, watching Benedict closely now. The audience is split, some nodding along with Sunny, others watching Benedict with sympathy. He leans back slightly, inhales, then leans forward again. "I'm not trying to center myself," he says, his voice firmer now. "I'm responding when I'm asked. I'm sharing my perspective, not claiming it's the only one." Sunny doesn't break eye contact. "But do you see how your perspective carries more weight simply because of who you are?" The question lands harder than the others. Benedict pauses. The silence stretches. You can almost hear producers off camera holding their breath. This is live. There's no cutting away. No second takes. "Yes," he finally says. "I do. And that's exactly why I try to use it responsibly." Responsibly according to whom? Sunny asks. A few gasps from the crowd. A smattering of applause. Benedict's jaw tightens. His fingers curl slightly against the arm of the chair. "According to my conscience," he says. "And my willingness to listen when I'm wrong." Sunny raises an eyebrow. And have you listened to the people who said your comments felt dismissive? Benedict opens his mouth, then closes it. For a split second, he looks less like a movie star and more like a man recalculating in real time. I've listened, he says carefully. And I've reflected. But reflection doesn't always mean agreement. The studio hums. Sunny leans back now, folding her arms loosely. That's fair, she says. But reflection without accountability can feel empty to the people affected. There's a beat. Then Benedict lets out a short, quiet laugh, not amused, not mocking. More like disbelief. With respect, he says, his voice cooler now. Accountability doesn't mean surrendering your right to think critically. The temperature spikes. Sunny's smile fades completely. No, she replies. But it does mean understanding when your critical thinking reinforces systems that already silence others. The audience reacts audibly now, applause mixed with murmurs, a few sharp hum sounds cutting through the air. Benedict glances briefly toward the crowd, then back to Sunny. I don't accept that premise, he says. Challenging ideas is not the same as silencing people. Sunny leans forward again, this time unmistakably. It can be, she says, when the challenger holds more power. The word power echoes louder than anything else said so far. Benedict exhales through his nose. So what's the alternative? He asks. That people like me simply step aside and say nothing? No, Sunny says quickly. The alternative is listening more than speaking. A pause. Benedict nods once, slowly. I do listen, he insists. But listening doesn't require self-erasure. Now Joy Behar jumps in, sensing the escalation. Okay, she says, half smiling. Let's all breathe for a second. The audience laughs nervously, grateful for the release. Benedict offers a tight smile in Joy's direction. Sunny remains focused. I'm not asking for self-erasure, Sunny says, her tone calmer but no less intense. I'm asking for humility. Benedict's eyes flicker. Humility doesn't mean never pushing back. No, Sunny agrees. It means knowing when pushing back isn't about the issue, but about ego. That one hits. For the first time, the audience goes completely quiet. Benedict sits very still. The cameras linger on his face, catching the subtle flush rising in his cheeks. When he speaks again, his voice is lower, more controlled. I take issue with the suggestion that my engagement comes from ego, he says. If I didn't care, I wouldn't be here having this conversation. Sunny nods. And I respect that you're here, she says. But being here doesn't automatically make the conversation balanced. The silence stretches again, thicker now. The hosts exchange glances. Somewhere off camera, a producer gestures frantically, signaling time, but no one is ready to move on. Benedict looks down at his hands, then back up. So what would you have me do differently? He asks. Sunny doesn't answer immediately. She studies him, as if deciding how honest to be. I would have you lead with listening, she says finally, and follow with support, not debate. Benedict's lips press together. Sometimes debate is how understanding grows. And sometimes, Sunny replies softly, debate is how harm continues. The audience erupts, applause, gasps, voices overlapping. The moment has tipped. What started as an interview has become something else entirely. Benedict sits back, eyes distant for a heartbeat, as if absorbing the weight of the room. When he looks back at Sunny, there's no smile now. Only resolve. I hear you, he says. But I won't apologize for thinking out loud in a world that desperately needs thought. Sunny meets his gaze. And I won't apologize for protecting voices that rarely get this microphone. The applause swells again, louder, divided. The camera pulls back, capturing the entire table. 6 people frozen in a moment none of them expected when the show began. And somewhere between the clapping hands and the stunned faces, it becomes clear. This isn't just a tense exchange. It's the beginning of something far bigger and far more uncomfortable than anyone planned. The applause doesn't die down so much as it fractures, some clapping hard in approval, others hesitant, unsure which side they're even on anymore. The studio lights feel brighter now, harsher, like they've been turned up to expose something raw. Benedict Cumberbatch remains seated, shoulders squared, face composed but no longer relaxed. The easy charm that usually cushions his public appearances has evaporated, replaced by a stillness that reads as restraint rather than calm. Sunny Hostin takes a breath. It's subtle but visible. The kind of breath someone takes when they know they've crossed from conversation into confrontation, and chose to do it anyway. Whoopi Goldberg clears her throat. All right, she says slowly, voice steady but cautious. This is clearly touching a nerve, and maybe that's not a bad thing. Benedict, let me ask you this. Do you think celebrities sometimes underestimate how much influence they really have? Benedict turns toward her, grateful perhaps for the shift, but the tension follows him like a shadow. I think some do, he says. And I think some overestimate it. Influence isn't control. People still think for themselves. Sunny interjects almost immediately. But influence shapes the conversation. It sets the tone. When someone with your platform frames an issue as debatable, it can invalidate people who are living it, not theorizing about it. Benedict's eyes flick back to her. But framing everything as unquestionable shuts down dialogue entirely, he counters. If we can't discuss difficult ideas openly, then what's left? Echo chambers. The audience reacts, some applause, some murmurs of dissent. A woman in the front row shakes her head. A man a few seats back claps loudly, almost defiantly. Sunny's voice tightens, though she keeps it measured. Open dialogue requires equal footing, she says. And that's rarely the case when power dynamics are this uneven. Benedict leans forward now, elbows resting on his knees. This isn't defensive posturing anymore. It's engagement, intense and deliberate. Then how do we ever reach equal footing if those with platforms are told to wait until perfection exists? He asks. Change doesn't happen in silence. Sunny's eyes narrow just slightly. Neither does harm. The word lands again, heavy, unavoidable. Joy Behar lets out a small, incredulous laugh. You know, she says, trying to lighten the mood, this is getting very philosophical for 11 in the morning. A few nervous chuckles ripple through the audience, but they don't last. The energy has shifted too far for humor to pull it back. Benedict smiles faintly at Joy, then turns back to Sunny. I'm genuinely asking, he says. If people like me are expected to only amplify and never analyze, aren't we just performing agreement rather than engaging with substance? Sunny tilts her head. Sometimes amplification is the substance, she replies. Especially when others don't get invited to analyze on national television. There's a beat. Benedict opens his mouth, then closes it. For a fleeting moment, something like frustration flashes across his face, quickly masked but caught by the cameras. So what you're saying, he begins slowly, is that my participation itself is the problem. Sunny doesn't hesitate. I'm saying the way you participate matters more than your intention. The audience breaks into applause again, louder this time. Someone whistles. Someone else shouts. That's right. Benedict glances out at the crowd, eyes scanning faces that are no longer just fans but jurors. He straightens, inhales, and speaks with a firmness that cuts through the noise. I don't believe that questioning ideas is an act of dominance, he says. I believe it's an act of respect. I respect people enough to think critically about the world they're describing. Sunny leans back, crossing her legs. And I believe that some questions don't come from curiosity, she says. They come from comfort. A sharp intake of breath ripples through the room. Whoopi's eyebrows lift. Joy goes still. Even the audience seems to sense that something irreversible has just been said. Benedict's smile disappears completely now. That's a strong accusation, he says. It's an honest observation, Sunny replies. The silence that follows is thick, almost oppressive. The kind that makes every small movement feel amplified. The rustle of papers, the creak of chairs, the distant hum of studio equipment. Benedict finally breaks it. You're assuming my comfort, he says quietly. You don't know the full extent of my experiences. Sunny nods once. I know you're wealthy, influential, and widely respected, she says. Those things matter in these conversations. They don't make someone immune from struggle, Benedict responds, a trace of edge creeping into his voice. No, Sunny agrees. But they do buffer you from consequences. That's when the audience truly erupts. Applause, shouts, overlapping reactions that force Whoopi to raise her hands. Okay, Whoopi says firmly. Let's slow this down. But Benedict isn't finished. I take issue with that, he says louder now. Public scrutiny, misrepresentation, being reduced to sound bites, those are consequences. And they're not insignificant. Sunny meets him head on. They're not the same, she says. And you know that. The words hang between them, sharp and final. Benedict's jaw clenches. So we're ranking suffering now, he asks. Deciding whose voice counts based on a hierarchy of pain? Sunny shakes her head. We're acknowledging reality, she says. Not all microphones are equal. Not all fallout is survivable. The room feels smaller somehow, as if the walls have crept inward. Even the hosts who haven't spoken seem tense, caught between admiration and alarm. Benedict leans back, running a hand briefly over his face. When he looks up again, his eyes are intense, almost wounded. I came here to talk about art, he says. About storytelling. About empathy. And this is empathy, Sunny replies. It's uncomfortable. It challenges you. A murmur of agreement from the audience. He lets out a short breath. Empathy goes both ways, he says. Or it's not empathy, it's expectation. Sunny's voice softens, but her stance does not. Empathy doesn't require you to win, she says. Sometimes it requires you to yield. The word yield seems to strike a nerve. Benedict sits up straighter. Yield to what? He asks. Silence. To listening, Sunny says again. There it is. The loop. The same words circling each other, refusing to align. Joy Behar finally jumps back in, hands raised. All right, before this turns into a graduate seminar, she says, half joking, half pleading, let's remember we're all on the same side here, right? Benedict doesn't answer immediately. Sunny doesn't either. The audience watches, rapt. Finally, Benedict speaks. I don't know that we are, he says calmly. At least not in how we define progress. Sunny nods. And that, she says, is exactly why these conversations matter. Another wave of applause washes over the set. The director signals frantically, commercial break approaching. But the moment has taken on a life of its own. Benedict glances toward the camera now, as if suddenly aware of millions of viewers beyond the studio. His voice drops, becomes more deliberate. I'm not afraid of criticism, he says. But I am wary of a culture that punishes curiosity. Sunny responds just as evenly. And I'm wary of a culture that calls accountability punishment. The clash is complete now. Two worldviews, neither willing to bend. Whoopi finally steps in with authority. We need to take a break, she says firmly. Clearly, this conversation isn't going anywhere quickly. The applause is scattered, uneasy. As the music swells and the cameras pull back, Benedict and Sunny sit in silence, not looking at each other, both visibly processing what just happened. As the screen fades to commercial, one thing is certain. This isn't cooling down. When they come back, the gloves won't be back on. The music fades, but the tension doesn't. When the cameras come back up, it's like stepping into a room where an argument paused mid-breath and never quite exhaled. The audience settles slowly, whispers trailing off as producers scramble behind the scenes. Benedict Cumberbatch sits exactly where he was left, back straight, hands clasped, gaze forward. The break didn't soften him. If anything, it sharpened his focus. Sunny Hostin adjusts the papers in front of her, though she doesn't need them. Her posture is composed, but there's a fire just beneath the surface now. A sense that whatever restraint she had before the break was spent. Whoopi glances between them. All right, she says carefully, we're back. Let's try to move forward in a way that's constructive. Benedict nods once. I agree. Sunny turns to him. So do I. There's a pause. The kind where everyone knows the next sentence could tip the scale in either direction. Sunny speaks first. Benedict, you mentioned during the break that you feel curiosity is being punished, she says. I want to understand what you mean by that. He exhales, slow and measured. We're living in a moment where asking the wrong question, even sincerely, can get you labeled, dismissed, or attacked, he says. And that creates fear. Fear doesn't lead to understanding. It leads to silence or performance. A few nods in the crowd. Light applause. Sunny listens, hands folded. When he finishes, she leans in. But fear exists on the other side too, she says. For people whose lives are shaped by policies and attitudes debated like abstract ideas. When your curiosity questions their reality, it can feel like erasure. Benedict's brow furrows. But how do we test ideas if we can't examine them? Sunny answers without missing a beat. By examining systems, not personal identities. The room reacts, soft ooze, a few claps. Benedict tilts his head. Those two are often intertwined, he says. Art especially lives in that tension. Sunny's eyes flicker. Art doesn't exist in a vacuum, she says. And neither do artists. That lands differently. The audience quiets again. Benedict's voice lowers. I've spent my career trying to inhabit lives unlike my own, he says. To understand them. To humanize them. Sunny nods. On screen, she says. With scripts, directors, and distance. The distinction stings. It shows in the way Benedict's lips press together before he responds. You think that empathy only counts if it's lived? He asks. I think lived experience should lead the conversation, Sunny replies. Especially when the stakes are real. Benedict shifts in his seat. And where does that leave Art? He asks. Where does that leave imagination? Sunny doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. Art listens before it speaks, she says. At least the good kind does. A beat. The audience claps, louder now. Benedict lets out a breath, half laugh, half sigh. Then perhaps the issue isn't that I spoke, he says. It's that I didn't listen enough first. It's the closest thing to concession so far, and the room feels it instantly. A ripple of reaction moves through the audience. Whoopi leans forward slightly. Sunny studies him. That acknowledgement matters, she says. But it can't stop there. Benedict nods. I know. For a moment, it seems like the temperature might finally drop. Like this could turn into something reflective, even productive. Then Benedict adds, but I also won't accept the idea that my voice is inherently suspect because of who I am. The tension snaps back like a pulled wire. Sunny's expression hardens, not angry but resolute. No one said suspect, she says. I said contextual. Benedict's eyes sharpen. In practice, those feel very similar. The audience murmurs again. Someone sighs audibly. Sunny crosses her arms. If being asked to consider your context feels like suspicion, she says, that says more about how rarely you've been challenged. A collective gasp ripples through the studio. Even Whoopi blinks at that one. Benedict sits very still. When he speaks, his voice is steady but colder. I'm challenged constantly, he says. Publicly, privately, professionally. By equals, Sunny replies. Not by those whose lives depend on the outcome of these conversations. The words hang heavy. Benedict shakes his head slowly. That's an assumption. It's a pattern, Sunny says. The audience erupts again, applause, shouts, divided but loud enough to shake the moment. A producer's voice is faintly audible off camera, urging calm. Benedict looks toward Whoopi. Am I allowed to respond to that? He asks, not sarcastic but pointed. Whoopi nods. You are, she says. But keep it moving. He turns back to Sunny. You're asking me to accept a framework where my ideas are pre-weighted, he says. Where my intentions are secondary to my identity. Sunny doesn't flinch. I'm asking you to accept a framework where impact outweighs intention. Silence. Benedict swallows. Impact is subjective, he says. It changes depending on who's listening. And intention is personal, Sunny replies. It changes depending on who's speaking. Another pause. This one longer. The audience senses the stalemate. Benedict's voice softens unexpectedly. Do you believe I'm acting in bad faith? Sunny hesitates. Just for a second. It's the first time she doesn't answer immediately. No, she says finally. I believe you're sincere. A visible shift. Benedict's shoulders lower slightly. But sincerity doesn't shield you from consequence, she continues. Especially when your words echo farther than most. Benedict nods slowly. Then perhaps the real issue, he says, isn't whether I should speak, but how society handles disagreement. Sunny tilts her head. Disagreement is healthy, she says. Disregard is not. The two lock eyes again, neither blinking. Joy Behar breaks in, voice tinged with nerves. I feel like Thanksgiving dinner just broke out on live TV. A nervous laugh ripples through the audience, but it doesn't fully dissolve the tension. Benedict cracks a faint smile, the first genuine one in a while. It does feel familiar, he admits. Sunny allows a small smile too, but it fades quickly. Except at this table, she says. Millions are watching. The reminder settles over the set like fog. Benedict looks out toward the audience, then back to Sunny. Then let me be clear, he says. I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to learn. But I won't be silent simply to be comfortable. Sunny nods. And I'm willing to engage, she says. But I won't soften truth to protect comfort. The applause that follows is loud, sustained, emotionally split but undeniably intense. Whoopi leans forward, hands clasped. I think what we're seeing, she says, is two people who care deeply, talking past each other because the ground beneath the conversation keeps shifting. No one argues with that. Benedict exhales. Sunny looks down briefly, then back up. The moment doesn't explode, but it doesn't resolve either. It lingers unfinished, like a held note that refuses to fade. And as the segment inches toward its final minutes, one thing becomes clear to everyone watching. Whatever happens next will define how this moment is remembered. Because the real reckoning hasn't happened yet. The final minutes arrive quietly, almost deceptively so. The kind of quiet that doesn't soothe but tightens. The audience senses it. The way people do when a storm has passed but the air still crackles with electricity. Benedict Cumberbatch sits forward now, elbows resting lightly on his knees, hands loosely clasped. Sunny Hostin straightens her notes, then sets them aside as if realizing there's nothing left on paper that can guide what comes next. Whoopi glances at the clock, then back at them. "We're almost out of time," she says. "I want to give each of you a chance to leave this conversation where you think it belongs." The audience stills. Phones are discreetly lowered. No one wants to miss the final note. Sunny speaks first. "This conversation isn't about winning," she says, her voice calm but weighted. "It's about recognizing that when we speak publicly, especially with power, we're shaping more than ideas. We're shaping people's sense of safety, of belonging." She looks directly at Benedict now. Not confrontational. Not softened either. "I don't doubt your intentions," she continues. "But intention doesn't erase impact. And if this moment makes even one person with a platform pause before centering themselves in someone else's lived reality, then it matters." The audience responds immediately. Strong applause, a few standing in the back rows. Sunny nods once, acknowledging it, then turns slightly toward Whoopi. Benedict doesn't move. He listens. When the applause fades, he takes a breath. The kind that fills the chest before a decision. "I agree with one thing completely," he says. "This isn't about winning." His accent feels heavier now, more pronounced, as if emotion has pulled it closer to the surface. "I don't believe silence creates justice," he continues. "But neither does arrogance. If I've come across as dismissive, then that's something I need to reflect on." A murmur ripples through the crowd. This is different. Not a defense. Not a retreat. "But," he adds, lifting his gaze, "I also believe that progress depends on uncomfortable conversations. Ones where we risk getting it wrong, and are allowed to learn rather than be erased." The applause this time is split but passionate. Two truths colliding, neither fully yielding. Sunny nods slowly. "Learning," she says, "requires listening first." Benedict meets her eyes. "And listening," he replies, "shouldn't forbid questioning." The exchange is quieter now, less combustible, but no less charged. It feels like the end of a chess match where neither side has been toppled, only exposed. Whoopi leans in. "I think what just happened," she says, "is that millions of people saw how hard these conversations really are. And maybe that's the takeaway." The audience applauds again, this time more unified, though still emotionally raw. The cameras pull back. The music swells gently, trying to smooth over edges that refuse to soften. Benedict and Sunny exchange a brief nod. Not reconciliation, not hostility. Something more complicated. Respect, perhaps. Or acknowledgement. As the show fades to commercial, the audience buzz doesn't stop. People talk over one another, gesturing, replaying moments in real time. Producers rush the set. Assistants lean in to whisper schedules and next steps. But the moment doesn't end when the cameras cut. It explodes. Within minutes, clips flood social media. Short, sharp segments stripped of context and shared with captions that read like verdicts. Sunny Hostin shuts down Benedict Cumberbatch. Benedict Cumberbatch refuses to apologize on live TV. This is what accountability looks like. This is why people are afraid to speak. The internet fractures instantly. On X, hashtags trend within the hour. Hashtag Team Sunny surges alongside hashtag Stand with Benedict. Comment sections become battlegrounds. Some praise Sunny for saying what needed to be said. Others accuse her of public shaming and intellectual gatekeeping. Think pieces follow. Fast ones. Angry ones. Carefully worded ones. One headline reads, "A necessary reckoning on daytime television." Another counters, "When dialogue turns into dissection." Benedict's name trends globally by nightfall. Fans dissect his body language frame by frame. The jaw tightening. The pause before he spoke. The moment his eyes drop to his hands. Some see humility. Others see resistance. Sunny is praised, criticized, defended, and attacked in equal measure. Supporters call her fearless. Detractors accuse her of grandstanding. Her inbox fills. Her mentions overflow. By evening, celebrities weigh in. Some post vague messages about listening more. Others speak directly, choosing sides without naming names. A few stay conspicuously silent. The next morning, entertainment shows replay the exchange on loop. Panelists argue over who won. Commentators reduce a nuanced clash into scorecards and sound bites. But something deeper lingers beneath the noise. Viewers at home, Teachers, students, artists, activists see themselves in the tension, in the frustration, in the fear of speaking wrong, in the exhaustion of being unheard. The clip doesn't just trend, it unsettles. Benedict releases a short statement later that day. Carefully written, thoughtful. He speaks about reflection, about growth, about the importance of dialogue. He doesn't apologize outright. He doesn't double down either. Sunny responds on her show the next day. She stands by her words. She emphasizes accountability. She refuses to frame the moment as personal. Neither backs down. Neither fully concedes. And that's why the moment endures. Because it wasn't clean. It wasn't scripted. It didn't end with a hug or a neat moral. It ended with discomfort and the uncomfortable truth that progress is messy, public, and deeply human. Weeks later, people will still reference it. In classrooms, in comment sections, in quiet conversations between friends who don't agree but still want to talk. Not because someone was destroyed, but because no one was. And that may be the most unsettling part of all. Now it's your turn. Whose words landed harder for you? Benedict's insistence on open dialogue or Sunny's demand for accountability? Did one change your mind, or did it reveal something uncomfortable you hadn't considered before? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read them all. If this story pulled you in, challenged you, or made you feel like you were right there in the room, subscribe to Stage View for more explosive, cinematic moments where celebrities collide with real conversations. And if you believe stories like this should be seen and debated, share this video, because the conversation doesn't end when the cameras stop rolling.